about this 4-2-5 stuff and how much different this is going to be, if any, from what we've been accustomed to seeing in the, under Nick Saban, right? Because I would say on paper that people would probably say Saban was a 3-4 guy, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
but that definitely evolved. Um, like I know that like the playbook says 3-4 and all that kind of stuff, but over the last few years, it was a. I even hesitate to use these numbers because I have uh, very strong opinions about these particular numbers now. But it was a 4-2-5. Like when they lined up, that's essentially what it was. With just two high safeties instead of one. Um, but my firm opinion is um, these numbers don't matter, and I have some of these graphics or little pictures drawn up to kind of illustrate that those the numbers really mean nothing.
because it's really on how you line up, is what you're saying. And what we're going to show you here is how you can even manipulate a 3-4 to look like a 4-3 or 4-2-5, depending on
Mm-hmm.
how you do your personnel stuff. And so when I was first asked about it, well, when I was originally thinking, my mind went to, we've been playing 4-2-5. What are we talking
Ah,
about?
that's what.
What?
Oh, and and that's it's. And
You know?
I get into these debate. Well, I try not to get into these debates all the time, because and I don't want to be mean, but a lot of times when I get into those conversations, it's immediately clear to me that that person doesn't really know what they're talking about. Because yes, you read it and you say, okay, yes, Saban is a 3-4 guy, and Alabama's been running a 3-4, and it's like sure, but Dallas Turner's had his hand in the ground, and and Will Anderson also had his hand in the ground, and you had two fives, a three, and a one, and you had a nickel out here. So like it's call it a 3-4 if you want to, but let's put it this way: there's only two types of defenses: odd and an underfront. That's it. Everything else is just kind of sugarcoating on the back end. You're either an odd or even spacing, and for the last 9 years, I think Alabama's been predominantly in even spacing.
Even, yes, regardless of where the personnel was. And I think that's why, because that can be confusing from a defensive standpoint if you're thinking it's something, because you have to block different, or you have to identify people differently from an offensive side when you're trying to identify mics and
Mm-hmm.
who the rushers and all that kind of stuff. So it can get a little bit confusing. But let's talk about this just from a standpoint. The 4-2-5. Um, I guess there's some weaknesses and some strengths.
See, that's
Um,
why I had to print out my papers.
so let's which way you want to start first? Then you want to, well, let's talk about what could be bad with the traditional 4-2-5, right? You got four linemen, two linebackers, five defensive backs,
Mm-hmm.
as we're saying. Typically, we used to call that nickel back in the day. Um, now it's just base.
Yeah.
It's base. Um, so when you have the fifth DB, you're pulling off a linebacker, maybe,
Yeah,
or
maybe.
or something. And so does that make you have any concerns? Not you in general, but someone who's layman terms said, okay, you don't have the same amount of size, maybe. Does it make it hard to stop the run? More difficult? What do you think? Could that be a weakness of a 4-2-5?
All right, so
That's a great question by Jessica.
yes, Jessica says big backs, big O line, or concern for 4-2-5 right doesn't mirror, so attack the boundary. Okay, I think this is before we even talk about the weaknesses, I think this is a great time to show the graphic because
Okay.
the 4-2-5. Oh, I'm showing the wrong stuff here. Depending on how you actually line up, whether you have middle of field closed or not, is going to make a difference. So if you're going to play middle of the field closed in 4-2-5, which this is why I said most of this stuff these numbers don't matter, because if I just put X's up here on the board and didn't put letters and didn't color code it, somebody's going to look at this and be like, oh, that's just a 4-4. Be like, well, yeah, except we're going to call two of them safeties. So now it's not a 4-4, it's a 4-2-5. So I said these numbers are stupid. But in the case of what Jessica Brand's talking about, if you're running a 4-2-5 like this, it absolutely does mirror. And depending on how you're going to play your run fits, which I won't get into because I did a whole clinic and I spent 54 minutes just talking about run fits, so it can get really in depth. The point I would be making here is the way that I do our run fits out of 4-2-5. You don't want to really attack the boundary. I've got an 8-man. We'll call it an 8-man box. So since we're looking at it, we're talking about the weaknesses. I've got 5 weaknesses
All right.
that I wrote down. And we have to define a term first, meaning bubble. Bubble is any gap that doesn't have a defensive lineman in it. So there are 2 bubbles in 4-2-5, at least drawn up this way traditionally. B gap weak. Oh, I have a pin. Oh, yeah.
You forgot about that?
I sure did. B gap weak. Right here. It's a bubble. And then we have B gap or A gap strong. It's right here. Because there's no defensive line in here. And then angles. So down blocking on the 3-tech by offensive tackle is an easy. This is an easy down block, right? This angle is good. And then angling down on a 1-tech from the guard, also good. So I counted that as that's two more. And then the last one I have is the seams. So misalignment or technique issues can create horizontal or vertical seams or leverage by a force defender. We call these guys out here force defenders. So this area here, we're going to call seams because if you got bad technique out here, if you just kind of turn and leave, you're not reading your keys, you get, I'm just kind of making up a, belly here. You get an influence, you squeeze, you kick them out. Not very good if you got guys down here that's supposed to be part of the box that just bail. I would like to think that we're going to teach our guys a little bit better than that. This is things that I wrote down from coaching in high school, right? Where a lot of times people your safeties aren't reading run pass. They think they're pass first and they just leave and run with a receiver. So those are the weaknesses that I have. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that before we get into strengths and adjustments?
No. The only thing I wanted to make sure I point this out for Jessica is that I think I know where she said something about it being uneven is really because of the I guess you can't really see it, but maybe you can show it. If there was a too high shell that you got to do something a little bit different than if you're looking at Bama. If the R was back and the free safety was slid left or the other way.
Let me get to that because look, there it goes.
Yeah, so I'm sure that's what they're talking about what she is mentioning about.
Yeah, about attacking the boundary. And this is actually this is what I base out of here. And I think this is probably the look that we were getting from Alabama most of the time. depending on, there's a lot of things that you can look at here. But it's really paramount that you teach this guy how to read, run, pass, and what his keys are.
Yes.
We teach to look at the quarterback because these days the quarterback is the most polished guy on the field. I did a whole study with at least some of the film that we get is within 0.6 seconds, the quarterback is going to tell you run or pass very quick. And we're going to trigger very quickly. That's why we don't have our guys at 15 yards.
Did you play him at 8 or 10? Or how did it vary?
It varied, but no deeper than 10. I only let you get to 12 if this guy was a speedster and you thought you were going to get run past, and most of the time that guy is not a speedster. This guy over here in space is the speedster. So if you didn't have a number 2, this guy walks up. Like especially if it's a tight end. If it's a tight end, we're going to get to like 7.
Right.
Which is, you can basically damn near call him a linebacker at that point. So there are ways that we can adjust to kind of take away some of these bubbles, right? We can take this tackle and put him in a 2-eye, shade him this way, close this bubble down a little bit. And then we can also go to an indie front, which would actually move this guy also to a 2-eye. I didn't pull that slide, even though I have them.
Yep.
To shorten these bubbles, right? That's an easy way to shrink those bubbles a bit. But it also does.
He's saying that, and like I'd say to the listeners, what he's not talking about is also, which we won't need to get into, is movement when you're running people or running loops or gaps with the front people to try to mess
shorten and also shortens the distance of that they got to go if you're going to try to slant or twist and stunt and do all that kind of stuff. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strengths. 4-2-5 is a balanced defense. It has no significant numbers or leverage weaknesses versus base formations, meaning this spread. You want to get into 11 personnel or anything like that. Anything that's not out of the ordinary, you're not inherently going to have leverage problems or number problems. It's an 8-man front. I'm still going to call it an 8-man front, even with the safety back here, because of how we played this guy. He is supposed to be aggressive. And then you've got numbers inside with 4 defenders inside from B gap to B gap. So this is B gap. This is B gap. If I draw a line, I've got 4 guys in here. And our philosophy has always been defend the middle of the field, because as you've heard me say many times on this show, who is the best tackler on the team?
Hash marks?
No. The sideline. The sideline never misses a tackle.
Oh,
and you've got no strong off tackle bubble with the 3-tech defensive end, or a 7. You can play him in a 6 or a 7. I like to play him in a 7. It's just easier to teach. And then all of your defensive linemen are outside shaded to take away angles by down blocks from the defender that they're over. So they can only get down blocked by the next man over, which is going to open up a gap somewhere.
Yep. Okay, so I mean, I love this defense. I think you got to have the right personnel. Obviously, and this is, I guess, I want to get into this a little bit. The how you have to align. Well, let me see. How important is it to have someone? And we'll answer this question in just a second. Bring that back up in a second.
Okay.
Like the difference in your S and your R. Okay, because typically you're probably going to have someone opposite each other because of what you just said. One guy's got to cover more, right? But he's got to be a run defender. So it's going to be a little bit of hybrid something, maybe. I don't know. That's why I'm asking you what you think, between the S and R. So maybe I'll give mine. When I was running it, just a little bit before you. My R was one of the best players on the doggone football field. Felt like he needed to play man to man. He needed to blitz. He needed to stop the run. He needed to play deep half. He needed to do it all. We didn't have our S do as much of that. That was like our Charles Daniels, who was at UAB, more linebacker type guys, but still could play man. Like you said, when you go one high, we weren't worried about him covering the slot, but you weren't going to run to him because he was a oversized safety. And a lot of times we would stick him into the boundary just because of what Jessica was talking about. Not all the time, but some of the time, or if they had tendencies. So, anyway, how do you feel about those position groups and how you put people when you're looking at S's and R's?
So, great question, because I have notes.
I know you do.
I know because I put them in the playbook. So when I tell my coaches, like, look, this is the kind of guy you're looking for, they know. So our S, Sam, Star, Nickel, whatever. The 3 bullet points I tell them is this is a guy who could play safety or will linebacker.
Which one is this?
The S.
Okay.
Could play safety or will linebacker. He has to be able to win versus the 3x1 bubble, meaning number 3 is going to run a bubble and number 2 is going to try to come block him. He's got to be able to get off that block and get to that bubble. And for us, this is why, to me, it's harder to find a S than it is an R because of the way that we play it. He has to be able to carry number 2 vertical in a 3x1 set. Because we play a lot of quarters. Now, the Rover, the R, he's kind of got 2 bullet points. 3, really. I mean, one of them says game plan dependent, but that doesn't mean anything to anybody but me. He is the best tackling safety because he's into the boundary. He's the alley defender. There's fewer people over there. He's got to be the one that's got to tackle. And he is somebody that could play S. So if you want to think about it that way, he's got to be the best tackler, and he could go over there and play S if you needed him to. And then the 3rd bullet point is all caps, tackle, 2 exclamation points, because that guy, the way I really just say that guy's got to be the best tackler on the team.
Well, because he's gonna have to fit your backside B gap sometimes too.
Yes. Yep. He's got to fit. He's got to fit here, and he's got to fit there.
Yep. It ain't that easy. Some people think it's easy, but it's not that easy.
Yeah, no, it's easy to fit front side. Backside and that cutback is because you get that cutback and it's you 1-on-1. If you're the safety, you miss. It's a big deal.
Ooh, I see, David. Okay, what was did we answer the Bama Standards question?
No, we didn't. Which Alabama defenders do you feel like will thrive most in this defense? I really think it depends on whether or not he's playing single high or 2 high or a mix of both. But I think in general, it's going to be. I'm trying to think of what Coach Kane Wommack calls it because, and I know Jessica knows, because he does. One of them's the Sting, and the other one's the Wolf, I think. And Sting plays on the weak side, and Wolf plays on the strong side, which to me is just bonkers.
That's backwards.
Yeah, but that's the way they do it. So I think it's going to be. I still think it's going to be this guy here. Just simple. So Malachi Moore, I think, is going to be probably playing that position.
I'm going to say one of the
because he's going to be to the strong side. I'm this is a little bit of a made up number. I don't know what it is in college, but in high school, it's like 70% of runs go to the strong side. So runs are coming to you. You're going to be playing in space, which is where teams like to throw the ball most of the time, is to space. So this guy right here he's got to be an athlete in today's game. That guy is one of the most important. And I also think whoever is going to be playing at your free safety spot, middle open or closed, is also going to be getting a lot of action. Because if you're going to play with him in the middle of the field, he's damn near got to be the best athlete. Because now he's your ninth defender in the box. He's got to cover a lot of ground, hash to hash, and he's got to get down there and help in the run. So those two, I think, are probably who's going to thrive the most. Husky is their new star. There you go.
I don't know. We're gonna have to change that. We know where we got Husky from.
Well, he's from USA. That's not even. He's not from Washington.
I guess Coach might be. Yeah, I get it. And plus, Husky make me feel like I'm kind of a little overweight or something. I ain't Husky, so you know what I'm saying. But anyway, I do. I like the 4.25. Is the main thing I'm saying, and there are a lot, and we're only just touching the surfaces of just lining up, because often there's so many different ways you can cover and blitz, and who's coming, and who's the free safety. Look at him over here getting fancy with his stuff right here.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to show that, like, just because you're in a 4.25,
go back to the other one where it looks like a 3.3.
Yeah, doesn't mean that you can't just pop a guy over. Like, if you just slide everybody over half a man, you're in a 3-4.
Yeah, so this is like a 3-4.
Since that guy, that Husky's a defensive back, and you popped off an end who's now an outside linebacker, it's a 3-3. It's a 3-3-5. It's just not a stack, but whatever.
Right. So
I also have notes on the 3-3-5 too, on what I think strengths and weaknesses are and adjustments.
Well, and yes, because that is there are a whole lot of pressures you can do from this look too.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't.
A lot of sims too.
Yes. So, there's just so much you can do with it if you get the guys to comprehend it. And I think that might have been some of what we had last year that we talked about. It seemed like we were just, or maybe I talked about it, not you, simple. We were always good and we were always talented, but I don't know how elaborate we were. And I'm not saying we need to be elaborate, because you need guys to run fast and go make plays on defense. But when you start confusing people that don't know where you're coming from, then you got a chance. But you could also get hurt, because if you guess wrong.
Yeah. Well, and so one thing we do know about Coach Wommack is especially from Coach Womack's defenses last year versus our defense in the prior year. Coach Wommack is way more aggressive. Their Havoc rate, which probably means nothing to people who don't look at any analytics, but that just means like how often they're getting to the quarterback hurries, sacks, tackles for loss, things like that. They were top 30 in the country. Alabama was like at 42, but I'm pulling this off the top of my head, so I can't remember the exact numbers, but they were blitzing at a much higher rate than Alabama had been. I think Alabama was blitzing like 14% of the time. And I'm not saying, because look, I'm not a defense coordinator that likes to particularly blitz either. But that's the coordinator's mindset, right? If the coordinator likes to dial up some pressures and get after you, like Steve Spagnuolo from Kansas City Chiefs, like you just third down, he's coming after you. but you still got to deal with it. And if you're confident in that kind of stuff, then it's a big, that can be a game changer. And what I liked from watching some of the USA game tape was when they brought pressure, those guys were aggressive. They weren't going through the motions of blitzing. Like, everybody took off on the snap of the ball, and it looked like everybody thought that they were going to be the ones to get to the quarterback. And when you can blitz the quarterback with that kind of intensity, that becomes scary. Even if you're not actually getting there, just the fact that you have people coming at you with bad intentions is it can be a problem. That's when quarterbacks start seeing ghosts.
Well, and that is someone said up there, the swarm defense is interesting too. That is what it's about when you're talking about swarming. I know the literal sense of swarm, everybody run to the ball, get there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start when you're arriving with bad attitudes, or you're given the perception like, hey, all of us are about to eat, it's could be pretty good. So I think it's going to work out fine, man. I don't think it's going to be that much different for the guys because we said earlier, it's not that much difference of what they've been playing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like they're still going to play a lot of man anyway. So
yeah, terminology might change some. That would be one thing you'd have to look to see how they're calling something different than what they might have been calling in the past. But I guess that could change anytime. Definitely when you lose a head coach. Because the head coach may dictate, even if he gets new coordinators, that we're going to call it this. So all of the terminology might shift. But at that point, as a player, it's really just knowing what you used to call green is now red.
The thing that I've heard people be a little worried about changing the names. Like I think for a lot of fans, most of these names are sentimental because they've been doing this for 15 years, right? They've been calling it whatever they've been calling it for 15 years. And you think that it's hard to change that terminology. And as for somebody who took over from Coach Ferris and what you guys were doing, and
right.
I don't want to say essentially throwing everything out, but yeah, like getting away from stud and eagle and giving everybody, actually literally everybody, a brand new position name. Like all 11 positions have a different name. Well, I guess 9 of them because the corners are still corners, but whatever. And then whole new coverages from even my first year as the defense coordinator to the second year. It was all semantics. Like we didn't have. It was very easy for them to forget what was what they used to be called or anything like that. You come in, you teach it to them. They got way more time to study this than we do in high school, right? So for us to be able to pick it up in 2 days is not scary.
Yes. So I'll answer what Corey was saying about his defensive tackle stuff. To me, I think you just really need a good, which I just put in the chat, good 3 technique.
Mm-hmm.
But you need that anyway, because you need a good solid 1 technique too. Because you got angles, like JT said at the beginning. You got people that angle on you and double team you a lot.
Yeah. So I have, for your 3 tech, you want him to have enough size to play inside, but enough agility to play outside. Meaning, he's got to be big enough to be in the interior, but you want him to have enough agility to where he could play defensive end. Not saying that he is a defensive end, but he's got to have that kind of athleticism. And he's got to be able to get off blocks. He's got to be the guy that demands the double team. And your 1 tech That's the guy that you want to have some size, mats, and some strength. He's got to be able to hold the point. You also want him to be able to demand a double team, but for me, he's got to be the best block eater. He's just got to be the guy that's in the way, really.
That's your big guys that you see in the league when they're playing one in there in the middle. The Jordan Davises or whatever the guy was at Georgia, and the Mozzie Smiths from Michigan, them big old boys.
That Kevin Smith says he would worry about shallow crosses and wheels out of the backfield. So two things. I would say one, schematically, the 4-2-5 doesn't have a problem against this. But Alabama as a football team has a problem with
always had anybody out of the backfield the past few years.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter what defense it was running. They just wasn't covering the back. So you got push calls and things like that for a reason where linebackers are supposed to get out of there. And I really don't understand why we haven't been covering the back, especially if there's only one back in the backfield. It's like if that guy leaves, it ain't a running play no more, unless you got like Cam Newton or Tim Tebow or somebody back there in the backfield, but or Jaden Daniels or somebody. But if you're playing South Carolina and they got Spencer Rattler, like they're not running him on a draw. So if the back leaves, he's trying to throw the ball. Yep. So probably should cover that guy.
So 4-2-5, to me, when it comes to that, what he's mentioning here, I think it's, or what I say is, I think has happened is that the team has to be really, really good with disguising, not showing where you're going or whatever. That you can cover all of it. It's if people can get a beat on you. Even when you think about what Bama tried to do, where you're trying to show even and which side did you really go to, run to, that kind of thing. That's all part of it. But with this, again, it's not very much different. You just got to be able to hide and not tip your hand too early. And better teams, the better defenses that really understand the defenses, that can move, show something late, are going to have the advantage. So I don't know. I like the defense. I mean, you've seen Gary Patterson and other schools really run the heck out of 4-2-5, and I know he's kind of from that tree a little bit. They brought a lot of pressure, and they did a lot of things, as JT has already said. You playing man, you got to have some talent, you got to have some speed, all the things we got and that we're going to continue to get. It's really just executing it and calling the things at the right time. That's the part of the coordinator's job, is to really know when to call something, whether it's a base defense or some kind of pressure or something of that nature. So I'm feeling good as of right now. We'll just have to see how it all kind of pans out once, they got a lot of time to try to install this. So there's no reason for us to really be feeling too bad about any of it. You got all spring football. They're able to practice without the football now, right? I believe that's the rules. They can actually.
They can go out there kind of whenever they want to, as long as they don't have a ball or any equipment on. And I mean, you run routes on air and just have your defense covered up based on what they see, right? And then you can even do inside run without a ball, right? Because you just
right.
got to fit. I mean, both sides, right? So
yes, yeah, you're just going through the motion. So I know that they have to be doing that. So from a schematic standpoint, I think it should be good. Like we said, you should be able to dial up some pressure and do some things if they really want to.